city of the Philippines, Manila. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be in whatever time zones you reside in. I'm Art Bell, and I'm filling in this evening for George Norrie, who's got a righteous night off in a long series of nights that he works. It's great to be here. It's great to be back. All the ABs are well, indeed. In fact, as usual, if you'll go to the webpage, you will note a picture of Princess Asia, kind of a nice picture of Princess Asia, actually. She's off to ballet school this afternoon, and she's doing very well indeed. Goes to school 5 days a week. They start school here very early. Remember, she's only about 3 months and 3 years and a couple of months old now. But she's in school 5 days a week, pre-school, whatever it is. And also ballet school now on Saturday. So all the ABs well, including the furred ones, Yeti, Abby, Dolly, all doing well, scurrying around here, wishing they were in this room right now, I suspect. Following the show today, I've got the pleasure of going down to a hotel in Makati here in Manila to see Dennis Mockenbacker speak. Mockenbacker, he's the head of Yaesu America. They make ham radio gear, and so I'll be whisking away from here at 5 o'clock after the show on my way there. I want to say hi to Charlie in Bangkok, Steve and Dan in Hong Kong, my ham buddies, talk all the time on the radio. Looking briefly at the national news, bad eggs. Bad eggs. Making a lot of people sick. About 1,500 people, in fact, so far, sick from bad eggs. And the FDA now says they're going to inspect all of the country's largest egg farms. Before the end of the year, they're going to be very busy. Now, I mean very busy. They've never done that or anything even close to it. It's sort of gone, I don't know, unchecked for decades. So they're going to look at all of them. Maybe we can start eating eggs again, huh? Arizona Governor Jan Brewer demanded on Friday that a reference to their state's controversial immigration law be removed from a State Department report to the UN Human Rights Commissioner. The U.S. included its legal challenge to the law on a list of ways the federal government is protecting human rights. I wonder what they're doing for the actual citizens. An American imprisoned in North Korea is on the way back to Boston thanks to Jimmy Carter. Big hug to Jimmy on the way back to Boston now. Hey, we're not having as many babies in the United States, or I guess I should say y'all are not. The recession, it says, may have pushed the U.S. birth rate to a new low. Forget the Dow and the GDP. Here's the latest economic indicator. I doubt it will affect the Dow, though. The U.S. birth rate has fallen to its lowest level in at least a century, as many people apparently decided, well, they just can't afford another mouth to feed. The birth rate dropped for the second year in a row since the recession began in 2007. Birth rates fell another 2.6%. Wow. Just last year, even as the population grew, numbers released Friday by the National Center for Health Statistics. Whew. The recession is bad. I am afraid there's going to be a double dip. All the indicators are going south. I mean, virtually everything. Revised GDP down to 1.6%, I think, something like that. This is a very serious economic situation in the United States. The only area to really escape is here in Asia. Here in the Philippines, for example. Third world, right? 7.9% growth in the last quarter. So things are well here. Europe and the U.S. both locked in the middle of a pretty deep recession, and I fear for the immediate future. Researchers using NASA's fleet of 5 spacecraft have now discovered a form of space weather that packs the punch of an earthquake and plays a key role in sparking bright northern lights. They're calling it the space quake. I wonder if that's has any relationship to a time quake stolen from a movie. The spacequake is a trembler in Earth's magnetic field. It's felt most strongly in Earth orbit, but not exclusively in space. The effects can reach all the way down to the Earth itself. I wonder if that accounts for some of the strange rumblings that we've heard and felt that nobody can identify. We're going to be talking tonight about abduction and human mutilation. My guest is going to be Butch Witkowski, and this is going to be a very interesting topic. It's a very, I guess, rare topic. You don't talk about it a lot, and I want to warn the audience that some of this could be kind of graphic, and so if you want to get the children out of the room, that would be all right, though it's not going to be graphic in the visual sense. To me, the evidence for extraterrestrial visitation is strong. It's compelling. Very strong, very compelling. I've seen it myself, so it doesn't get much better than that. The evidence for mutilation, cattle mutilation, is intriguing, compelling, and pretty strong. There's no doubt about that. The evidence for abduction of human beings and mutilation of human beings is circumstantial, speculative. Although I've heard stories myself, as you know, I interviewed Travis Walton any number of times, and I thought that was a very, very credible story. But still, it's circumstantial in the sense of how much evidence there is. Now, I may be turned around on that this evening by our guest, Butch Witkowski. We'll see. Butch Witkowski has been an independent researcher since way back in '89, when he and four others witnessed a UFO of unbelievable size hover over a mountain, not a mountain, but a mountain, I guess is the name of it, in Tucson, Arizona. Butch joined MUFON in 2007, giving him considerably more access to cases, of course, and on-site investigations. He became a field investigator, state section director, and chief investigator for Pennsylvania MUFON. Butch also was made a member of the STAR team. After relinquishing his position as chief investigator, he began the UFO Research Center of Pennsylvania. There, he brought together the best like-minded researchers he could find in all kinds of fields: forensics, photography, chemistry, law enforcement, biology, EVP, private detectives, fraud investigators, private pilots, computer techs, biochemists, geology, hazardous materials, paranormal, and cryptozoology researchers, along with a number of consultants in ufology, paranormal, abduction, and cryptozoology. They'll pursue both historical and new cases, hopefully resolve some of these cases of high strangeness. He feels that this research group was needed and the way to go forward in the quest for the truth. So, even though it is somewhat speculative in nature, this evening we will look into human abduction and human mutilation. All of that beginning in a moment. Well, all right, away we go. Butch Witkowski. Butch, welcome to Coast AM.
I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you. I have some... I get these little computer messages as we go on with the program. Mm-hmm. And there are some who are already saying, look out for Butch, it's going to be disinformation.
Wow.
Any idea why anybody might say that before we even get started?
No idea.
Okay. I love to ask people this. I'm going to ask you how and why you got into ufology.
After seeing a sighting in Tucson with some other folks, it was pretty nasty. We all stood there and stared at it and made some calls to the local police department, sheriff's department, local Air Force base, and everybody kind of thought we were crazy, and they had no reports, and we knew what we saw. We all saw the same thing at the same time, and I just
What did you see, Butch? What did you see exactly?
I saw a craft, bronze in color, approximately 1,800 feet above a mountain, and about 300 feet in length, and maybe 6-7 stories high, and totally silent, just hovering. and then rose up a few thousand feet and just was gone in a shot. So fast I couldn't believe it.
Well, I'm with you there. I've had my own sighting. I'm sure you've heard. Or perhaps not. It was triangular in nature and just above my head. There was no mistaking it. That's why I said at the beginning of the show, there's no question in my mind. As far as sightings and visitation is concerned, they are there. It's strong, compelling evidence, period. So we're being visited. There's very little argument, certainly from this audience, for that. Then we get to mutilation, intriguing, compelling, the cows and so forth and so on. Abduction and mutilation of human beings, that's a little more speculative for me, but we'll get to that. So, you obviously, after having a sighting like that, I understand completely, you kind of go into shock, and I guess that took you into MUFON, huh?
Well, I stayed at it until I think it was late 2002, and then I just gave up. I just figured there was no end to it, and you couldn't get an answer, and every time you'd ask a question, you were just getting another question. And then I went to MUFON in 2007, thinking I could get more information and be around more researchers and try to get some answers, but that didn't work out either. It just seemed like they did a fine job of taking the cases, but then there was never an answer. They were put into a database, and that's kind of where they stayed. So I didn't get an answer there.
Well, that is MUFON's job, though, to collect the data,
right,
and to keep it. And so you at least then had access to a lot of files and a lot of cases, right?
Right. Yeah, and got to look at a lot of things from way back. I mean, they kept records in '69, so they did a real good job at that. And then I just got antsy and wanted to go further. And around beginning of 2009, I started putting together the UFO Research Group of Pennsylvania.
Okay. What did you learn with your research group that MUFON couldn't give you?
We could go a little further in the fact that we had professionals, people that are working police officers, working fraud investigators, and so forth. And it was just a lot easier getting information, and there was a lot of avenues opened up as far as forensics and stuff like that we couldn't get from MUFON.
Did anything in any of the cases that you did, I don't want to dive too deeply just yet, we're just beginning, but with the ability to have forensics at hand, I know, in a murder investigation, it's frequently the thing that makes the case, a little hair, a little DNA, a little something. So with forensics available to you, you probably did get more than MUFON. What kind of stuff became available to you? Evidence.
Well, like in the Carbondale case, the Lantern case in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, we'd gotten the original reports, and then we went to the site, and we were there a number of times, and samples and water samples and soil samples and direction and actually measuring the area and, doing a real physical walk-around of everything and matching up the original report showed us that the report was all wrong. Everything was wrong. They talked about a current that was moving this light around inside the pond. Well, it's a silt pond. There is no current. We tested that, and right now we're having some side scan radar done also. We can't prove what went into that lake. Into that pond, but we can sure as heck prove it wasn't a lantern. That's a fact.
Okay. Make me a little more familiar with the case. Something went into a pond.
Yeah, some young folks were standing on a corner in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, and they witnessed a bright light come over a mountain and kind of give itself kind of a controlled landing into a silt pond at a coal mine. And they called the police. The police didn't come right away, and then they called them again. They didn't come. They called them a third time, and they finally showed up. and one of the officers, upon getting out of his car, fired his revolver into the light 4 or 5 times, which was kind of strange. And then a researcher from Philadelphia shows up 3 days later and takes control of the case. And Dr. Daines, he comes out of Chicago from Hynek's outfit, and so everybody's studying this thing, but it's like 3 days after the fact. And the folks are saying, the townsfolk are saying that something was taken out Sunday night. It happened on a Sunday night. Military was there, took something out on a flatbed, and the rest of it was just play acting with the lantern. And then they refused divers from the local area to go into the pond, but they allowed a diver who just happened to be listening to it on his car radio and traveling on the turnpike and happened to have his gear with him to dive the pond. And he dove the pond and came up with the lantern. We've had the lantern. We've gotten a number of lanterns, which are the exact make and model, and we even got one battery, which would have been from the time period that this took place. And we sent a letter to battery people that made that battery for Sears, Roebuck, and we told them that when the battery was brought out of the water, when the lantern was brought out of the water, and the battery was removed, that the battery was split open and it was oozing the interior acids. And we asked him how long that battery would stay lit. And the guy said, well, the battery would never be lit because the continuity was lost. But the report said the battery was lit for 3.5 days. So there were just a lot of things that we had to chase down to, get the information that we got. And as soon as we're done with the side scan radar on it, we're just going to probably put an end to that one. Like I said, we can't prove what went in there, but we sure can prove it was not that lantern.
Have you ever been able to prove an abduction/mutilation case of a human being?
No, that's a relatively new investigation. I was asked to do a presentation on abduction by my director in Pennsylvania 2 years ago, and I really never heard of anything like that. And while I was doing some research on the abduction, I came upon this mutilation stuff and started to dig into that a little bit, and it really gets really wild.
Well, abduction itself is wild. I, of course, have interviewed Travis Walton a number of times, and I found Travis's story, and in fact his boss's story as well, and those involved to be very credible.
Mm-hmm.
That's abduction. Mutilation is obviously a gigantic step further. You're familiar with Travis's story, I'm sure.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How would you rate that in the, on a scale of 1 to 10 in the abduction stories?
I would say it's definitely an 8.
Up there at an 8, huh?
Yeah. If he had just a little bit more evidence, it would probably be a 10.
Yeah, evidence, of course, is very, very difficult. Do you have any idea, or even a best guess, I'll settle for a best guess, Butch, about why aliens would abduct and even mutilate a human being, or a cow for that matter? In other words, what do you think is going on? Why?
There have been I've found so many different reasons that was taking place. From of course, the government side of it, where people are saying, well, the government's doing that because they made this deal with the aliens back in the 50s to abduct people just for experimentation or examination, and then they would return them, and then you get the cows are used for some mixture of their blood and organs to make some type of a food supply that they rub on themselves, which is saturated in their skin because they do not eat like we do. There's just one after the other, which nobody can ever say anything that, this stuff has taken place, or, we know of the abduction scenario. We know there's a capture, we know there's an examination, we know there's a conference where the abductors speak to the abductees, we know there's a tour of the ship, lost time, the return.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all the same. It never changes in that respect.
Well, that's almost evidence of a sort all by itself, the fact that it never changes. All right, Butch, hold tight. We're at a break point, and we're going to come back and get a whole lot deeper into this. And anybody who knows anything about the mutilation of human beings by others from elsewhere, we'll be talking to you too. Other side of the world, actually, from the majority of you. Good morning. I am Art Bell, and it is a night off for George. We're looking into human abduction and mutilation, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Coming up tomorrow night, continuing the Coast Weekend, is Ian Punnett here now to tell us what's up for Saturday. Hi, Ian.
Hey, Art. I never really noticed it until I just heard it right there, but it almost sounds like Charlie Daniels is rapping. It's coming pretty close to a rap.
Yeah, I guess it is.
That rhythm that he hits is pretty good. Two things tomorrow night. Our main guest is an expert on the occult and on mysticism, as well as being a founding member of the rock group Blondie. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he's writing about Carl Jung, mysticism, and he writes a lot about how occultism is still at work in American politics. And we'll talk about that tomorrow night, along with Harry Shearer in the first hour, who is taking a look at how it was that New Orleans was in the crosshairs of the world at the time of Katrina, why, in a way, it was set up. Why did it happen to New Orleans? What were the factors involved 5 years later? We'll talk to Harry Shearer in the first hour.
I guess you've heard the news about the possibility or even probability that police officers in New Orleans were given an order to shoot unarmed civilians who may have been looting. You heard that, right?
Yep, and we're going to talk to Harry about that. We're going to talk to Harry, too, about how it is that, in a lot of ways, some of those early weird things about how the people were being treated during Katrina are still in effect today and still may be at work in how they're treated as a result of BP and the oil spill in the Gulf. We'll talk about that tomorrow in the first hour.
You know, Ian, I think people should listen because it'll give you an idea of how quickly society can degenerate to virtually an animal state. And if the economy were to really go south, Ian, well, listen tomorrow night.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Ian, thanks a million. Have a great Saturday show. Take care, buddy. All right, I guess he's gone. All right, in a moment, we'll get back to Butch Witkowski, and I've got a little story somebody named Barbara sent me that I want to read for Butch. Stay right where you are. Well, all right, we'll get back to Butch in just a second. I want to read this to you. It was sent by Barbara. I'm going to redact the name. Even though the name of the victim is given to me, I'm not going to read it for, I don't know, various reasons, people's feelings and that sort of thing. It's a real case. Barbara says, I'll be as brief as possible. A man named, redacted, was abducted and murdered by aliens on Montour Ridge in Northumberland County near the town of Northumberland, Pennsylvania. This is a big, sloppy cover-up, Barbara says, if there ever was one. The victim lived at the foot of Montour Ridge, a mountain stretching about 20 miles east. Name redacted, went up to the mountain to look for preseason deer. He told his wife that he'd be home by noon. He rode his four-wheeler up the power line, that's a power line road, I guess, beyond his home at a little after 5 in the morning. Noon came, and no name redacted. His wife and children became concerned. At 2, a search party was organized with local, state police, paramedics, and 200 volunteers, all helping to search for name redacted. The four-wheeler was found on top of the mountain near a power line. Tracking dogs could find nothing to go on around the four-wheeler. The search went on for 2 days, and over 6 miles of mountain were covered from top to bottom. He had apparently vanished without a trace. The four-wheeler was, keep in mind, 2 miles from his home at the foot of the mountain. A pond just a few hundred yards from the house was even searched by skin divers, so they overlooked nothing. Dogs were over the whole area consistently. No results, no trace. Then, in the evening of the second day, something white was spotted in a large, brushy area about 25 feet from the pond. Police and rescue workers spent 20 minutes cutting and hacking brush and small trees so they could reach what looked like a body. It was, name redacted. He was wearing his underwear. He was emaciated, not bloated. He was white. He had an expression of horror on his face. When he went up the mountain, he was fully dressed, boots, camo vest, hat, socks, pants. The FBI showed up within 30 minutes of the discovered body. They took charge. They wouldn't let his wife look at her dead husband, no matter how much she tried, and you would think they would want an identification. The FBI asked questions around the area, neighbors, mostly farmers. 3 farmers on one farm, that's 3 of them, mind you, said they saw a large, round, bright object just above the power lines at the time of the disappearance. It was silent. It did not move for about 10 to 15 minutes. That's quite a while. It suddenly went up and then suddenly stopped. The light shone down. Something was pulled up into the light, and then it went straight up, hesitated again, then went west over the Susquehanna River and out of sight. A police friend of mine said after 2, not 1, but 2 autopsies, nothing was found. A toxicology test revealed nothing, so no drugs. No visible cuts, no bruises anywhere except from the brush. Now, the body is at Allentown. From there, it's going to Fort Indiantown, Gap, Pennsylvania. The wife was told she cannot have the body for 6 to 8 weeks. A boot was found, get this, a mile from the four-wheeler a few days ago at the top of a tree. It was his boot. I noticed military helicopters have been scouring the mountain ever since, at least once a day. If you need additional information or verification on anything, contact me. And again, I'm deleting Barbara's last name. That sound at all familiar?
Yeah, quite. It's a case that we've been working on for a little over 2 years.
Oh, it is?
Yes. I would definitely like Barbara to contact me, because there's a couple of things that she just said that we're unfamiliar with.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's a well-known case. Peter Davenport, if you're familiar with him.
Of course, yes.
And I have been working on this for a little over 2 years, and with a couple other investigators. It is I don't know how to put it. It's one of those cases where you have a lot of information, but you don't have a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
You have what the police are saying, what the witnesses are saying, what the newspapers have said, and Peter Davenport's report was the very first report made on the case. It was very thorough. He was in contact with a lot of people. And the report that she just read to you is Peter Davenport's report. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things in the report that we've been trying to prove, but we cannot because it's still an open case. The autopsies did not find anything that we're aware of that was a cause of death.
I was just going to ask, cause of death.
Toxicology did. The toxicology, which came back a number of weeks later and was given out in September by the police department, Point Township Police, stated that Mr. Cease died of a cocaine overdose. Really?
Okay, well, that's contrary to what I read here. It said toxicology came up empty.
Right, yeah. She said there were 2 autopsies. Nothing was found. Toxicology revealed nothing. No, it did not reveal anything, but the toxicology that's done at a post, which is like a preliminary, would be like in a drunk driver case. The blood alcohol would be taken. That would be done right there at the hospital.
Sure.
Drugs or bullet wounds, residue from a gunshot or stab wounds, type of knife used, etc., would take a little longer. The toxicology for drugs is a breakdown of all bodily fluids and it does take quite a while. It's usually a 3 to 4 week process, but there's a sedimentation period with some of the fluids, and it just takes a little while. Mm-hmm. And when it came back and it said that he died of a cocaine overdose, I mean, everybody was quite surprised about that, especially Peter. It just seemed like there was so much information that came forth, and a couple witnesses that he had that I am not privy to at this point were in the search team, and we tried to find out some information on it, and one of my colleagues who was investigating it even before I was with Peter called the Point Township Police and wanted to get a copy of the police report, and they basically told him that it's still an open case.
Still an open case. Did they find, to your knowledge, any physical, paraphernalia or cocaine at the scene?
No, sir. Not that we're aware of. No. And
isn't that strange?
And it doesn't seem like he had any record of that type of use. Some friends of his were just talked with within the last 4 or 5 weeks. One of the investigators was up there, and one was with the fire department, who was also with the search team. And he knew nothing of any drug use, and he had known the gentleman for most of his life.
Okay, well, let's venture into an interesting area here, Butch. When the police are working on a scary case, some kind of serial killer case or something like that, they frequently withhold that information for as long as they're able. I mean, the public has a right to know and all of that, but they do withhold information because they don't want to panic communities, and that's understandable. And it's I mean, unless there's something the public can really help out with, there's no point in setting off a panic. Now, for that reason, they keep it secret. So imagine if there was a case of mutilation, or there was a case of a clear abduction or abductions. Surely telling the public that somebody had been abducted and parts were found at the top of a 100-foot tree or something would be
not happening.
Something they'd keep a lot more secret than they would a normal serial killer or something of that sort, right?
Well, yes, but there is one more part to that.
Sure.
Another reason you would keep a case open would be some of the reasons you would keep a case open would be toxicology wasn't right, or a witness came forward and said something quite contrary to the whole investigation, or it's a homicide investigation.
Well, you'd think it'd be case closed the moment the toxicology came back and said cocaine overdose. That's exactly
right.
Should have been it.
That's right? Exactly right. So either the Point Township Police have something else they're working on, or they're looking at some other type of charge, or maybe there's other people involved that they don't want to make known, or that we're not going to know about until it's done. It's the only reason they would keep a case open. I mean, once the toxicology would come back and say, like the gentleman died after getting hit on the head with a hammer. Okay, that's it. It's done. The case is closed. And this case is not closed. This is an open case.
Well, murder cases stay open forever, virtually.
Right, exactly.
Until somebody's caught, right?
Yes. And in this case, we don't know that that's a fact. I mean, this case is like one of those conundrums wrapped up in an enigma, in a mystery. So much stuff comes forward, and then when you check it out, it's non-existent.
Okay, let me take you in another direction for a second. I want to know, in the United States or in the world, if you have the figures, I know that thousands and tens of thousands of people, I guess, disappear every year. They just disappear. Now, obviously, some run away to South America or some island or something in the Pacific or whatever. Obviously, even perhaps a large percentage. But a lot of people just disappear and they're never, ever heard from again. What kind of numbers are we talking about?
The last check I did with the National Crime Reporting System, which is where all police departments report to the FBI every year, on all the cases that have everything from bicycle theft to murder, slaughters of any type, accidents, missing persons. When I did the research on that, about 95% of the people that go missing are found, and those are your runaways, mostly teenagers. They compose the biggest number. Then you have the spousal abuse, and you have drug abuse. You have old age folks just walking off into the woods and down into the valleys, and there's a whole number. But there's like 95% of that number of about 250,000 are found. Those are cases that are closed as found.
250,000 a year. That's in the U.S.?
Yeah, only in the U.S. We couldn't get any numbers outside the U.S. because most of the countries don't keep any numbers. If 50 people walk off in Africa, that's 50 people that just walked off.
Right.
But it still left that 5%, which was about 30,000. So if you take that 30,000, times the 10-year period that I looked at, it's quite a bit of people, and that's
a lot of people. But you're not on a cell phone, are you?
No.
Okay. 250,000, 95% or 5% of that 250,000 is still a lot of people, and those people are simply never found. They're
never
gone.
Gone. Men, women, children of all ages, all backgrounds, from judges to street cleaners. I mean, it's just they just seem to disappear off the face of the earth. And it seems to be a phenomenon that is only in the Western countries. Like they keep numbers, of course, in England and Germany, France. But when you get to the smaller countries, or larger countries that don't keep those numbers, like Africa and Middle East, the numbers are phenomenal. And if you just add another 5 years onto them, you're talking about quite a few people.
Yeah, you're talking about a lot of people.
And where are they? I mean, I can see a lot of them, a lot of people found, and I understand what they're saying with, the teenage runaways and spousal abuse and drunks and all that kind of stuff. But that 5%, they don't have an answer for. Nobody can find an answer for, but they're gone.
Well, it seems to me, Butch, that if you're an alien, let's just project here. If you're an alien, you want to abduct a human being, the last thing you'd want to do is return the human being in a mutilated form or any other form for that matter so that they could tell their story or so that there could be a forensic examination of the body and we could all begin wondering. So you would think if they're going to take human beings, why not keep them and deposit them either in space or on the moon or wherever in the world, but you wouldn't put them back, would you?
No. I think our little gray brethren from outer space are a little bit more malevolent than they are benevolent.
Well,
there's only one really...
Where I was going. Remember I told you I had a thing about disinformation?
Yeah.
Okay, this one is from Vince. Vince says, I strongly suspect your guest to be disinformation. Please don't let CIA assets make their way onto your show to make the public afraid of aliens. Abductions and mutilations are intelligence operations using electromagnetic technologies. All right, so what he's afraid of is that what you have to say, Butch, is going to scare people, as well it should, and that is disinformation. He wants aliens thought of as warm, fuzzy, little, I don't know.
Well,
warm.
If that's the disinformation that I'm supposed to be shelling out for the CIA, then I'll stand by that. But there is one case out of all these cases that we've found that is so well documented that I had a family physician look at it. I've had other investigators look at it, and it's probably the best investigated case of mutilation that has ever come across, and it happened in Brazil.
All right, we're going to get to that. We're at another break point here. I'll say it again. It seems to me that if there are abductions, and I think clearly there are abductions and mutilations, the last thing you'd want to do is return the body. So in the cases where bodies are returned or found, I would think that would be a mistake, because if you're an alien, you have a craft, you can go anywhere you want, there's no need to return the body and cause a lot of suspicion and angst, no reason at all. You simply keep it, and as the police say, find a dump site not on Earth. From the other side of the world, good day to you. The sun is high in the sky here, and it's presently, I don't know, about 6 minutes or so after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That tells you how different it is, and it very much is different here. It's a different world altogether. It's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like, well, as close as I can get, traveling to another world. Those of you that have not traveled to Southeast Asia, do so in your lifetime, if you're able. I think you'd be very surprised. Butch Witkowski is my guest. We're talking about human abduction and mutilation. It's kind of way out at the fringe of the whole UFO phenomena, but I think there very well may be something to it. There are many cases, and there are many cases, by the way, that simply are not reported, and yet many more cases that nobody knows a thing about because people simply are gone. And that would be my expectation. If all of this is real, as I mentioned and will mention again now, certainly those who are doing the abducting and or mutilation would have no reason to deposit or dump the bodies back in a place where they could be found and where we could begin to get on the track of all of this. So that's sort of how I see it. Butch has a case he's going to describe to us in a moment. I guess one of his favorites or one of the best cases coming right up. Well, all right, Butch, back we are, and you were about to dive into a case that I guess is one of your favorites.
Yeah, I guess only because it is probably the best documented. A lot of the cases that we found, the documentation was very poor, or the individuals that were involved in the case were long gone or passed away or could not be found. Mm-hmm. But this one came with photos of the crime scene and the autopsy report, which you can get and view on the internet.
Oh, no kidding. All right, this was in Brazil?
Yep. It took place at the Guadaparanga Dam, which is right outside of São Paulo. It is a man-made dam lake used to supply water to São Paulo. Mm-hmm. It took place in 1988. The body was seen on an island in the dam area by fishermen who were offshore. It was in full view. There was no attempt to hide the body. It was just dumped there like so much rubbish. You know, it's just laid there. The witnesses, instead of going there and, you know, getting all over the crime scene, did the smartest thing, which was they went and called the police, and the police showed up with forensic investigators also. Mm-hmm. The corpse was lying face up, only had on a pair of shorts. Now, the shorts were taken off to do the damage, and then were put back on. Vanity, I guess. I have no idea why. But the police didn't do that. The mutilation was exactly like cattle. So I guess for those folks that don't know what cattle mutilation is, when cattle are mutilated, the most things that are missing, or most things that are pronounced, are the carcass is drained of blood. There's no trace or any substantial amount around or in the body. There are unusual holes found in the carcass, usually 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter. They're produced by some kind of a sucking device or a laser type of device which can cauterize the wound with extreme heat. And that's been used in every case. The anus of the area is cored out just like you'd core out an apple. And the carcass is emptied of its digestive system. The sensory organs are taken: eyes, internal ears, tongues, glands of the throat, sexual organs, lower intestines, and that's pretty much in every case of cattle mutilation.
In addition, I believe you never, ever find footprints coming to or leaving the area. You also find predators not interested in such remains, right?
Yeah, there have been photographs and taken by the New Mexico State Police, which actually has a unit that investigates cattle mutilation, where they've set up cameras and watched wolves and coyotes walk around the carcass. That's like you and I walking past a buffet table that's free.
Right.
They're just passing up a free lunch, but they will not go anywhere near it. A lot of people
Butch, I'm sorry. Is there any reason that anybody's been able to discern for that? In other words, is there some scent or something that would cause an animal to not be interested in such a free lunch?
No. I've never read anything that gave any information to that. But they, in one case, they actually took a carcass that was hit by a car, and they put it 150 yards away from a carcass that they were investigating. And within minutes, vultures were on that carcass.
The predators were all over it, yeah.
They were all over it, but they never touched the other carcass, which was laying there.
There's got to be a reason they could uncover, Butch, for that. There's got to be. All I can think of is, animals operate on sense of smell very strongly. I don't know what other senses they might have that we don't know about, but I know the sense of smell is a very strong one, and maybe there is some scent, and maybe they'll look into that causes the animals to not be interested.
One of the, and again, it's the New Mexico State Police, I believe, that's doing some work on that, where they've sent stuff to private labs, and the organs, like the heart and the liver, are like mush. They're like peanut butter. And to do something like that to an animal, it would take a huge burst of radioactivity, a radiation burst of some sort, to turn those organs to that. And another thing they found, the blood, that little bit that they find inside the bodies, doesn't clot for several days. Now, I have pups, and my pups get into trouble too, and they'll nick or cut themselves, and the blood stops within a matter of minutes, just like a human. But this blood doesn't clot. It doesn't do anything for several days, and then it'll start to coagulate and it'll clot. They took the body, took photographs, of course, of everything, and the body was in good condition. Now, you got to take into account the heat in that area of the world, just like where you're at, just like Southeast Asia. The heat there is unbearable. So this victim was killed within 48 to 72 hours prior to discovery, yet there were no signs of putrefaction, no signs of any wounds on the body made by any predator animals, no bullet holes. The body gave off no odor, and the body showed no signs of rigor mortis or liver mortis. That's very
incredible.
Strange.
Yeah, very strange. High strangeness indeed.
I mean, you hit a rabbit on the road and come back a day later in a good heat, that rabbit's almost the size of your car.
That's right.
So the wounds were the same type seen on mutilated cattle and other mutilated animals. The eyes, the lips were removed, the mouth cavity was emptied, the ears were removed, along with tissue from parts of the face along the jaw, head, and neck areas. There were 1.5-inch diameter holes in the upper chest where the tissue, most likely lymph nodes, had been extracted. An exact duplicate hole is located on the upper right arm where all the muscle tissue was removed, the bicep especially. Another duplicate hole is located on the left leg where muscle tissue from the thigh was removed. An 1.5-inch hole through the navel is seen where the intestines were removed. The testicles and scrotum had been surgically excised through the penis, but the penis remained. It was also stretched to twice its size as it looked like some type of instrument was used to remove the prostrate via the urethral tube, and the anus had a 3 to 6-inch incision to empty the digestive tract tissue. It is exactly a carbon copy of the surgery scene done to so many UFO-related cattle mutilations.
Was there an associated UFO sighting?
That nobody can come up with. There are many sightings in Brazil. They're almost on a daily basis in that part of the world. And also, to take note, Brazil has one of the highest records of injuries from UFOs recorded, where cars are run off the road, accidents are caused, People are burned by them. Wounds appear like days after a sighting. Radiation burns, and that's predominantly in South America.
I was going to say it's not just Brazil. It's Mexico, for example, as well.
Yes.
Mexico has had so many close encounters. In fact, they've had collisions with UFOs from the Mexico City airport.
Yep, and Puerto Rico is another one where there's a lot of sightings coming out of where there's damage to either property or to livestock or to persons. The most horrific thing that we found when we had the autopsy, which is, by the way, is in Spanish, which we had to get deciphered for us, was this kept coming up, and it comes up several times in the autopsy report, the words vital reaction.
Vital reaction?
Okay, now, the reference to vital reaction means, well, let's put it, if I was a police officer explaining this to a judge, I would be saying that, a vital reaction is if you would stab a person that is dead, okay, you would have of course, the mark of the knife going in, and it would be a nice clean cut hole, and you could take the knife and slide it right into the hole again, and it would fit perfectly. Mm-hmm. You stab a live person, they twist, they turn, they jerk, they pull. That knife is not steady. That knife is being moved in a number of directions, so therefore around the wound you're going to get a lot of hematomas, blood bruising, and blackness and black and blues and different colors all around those wounds.
Sure, and if it's post-mortem, there's no blood moving, so you're not going to get much bleeding.
Exactly correct. Mm-hmm. Well, this guy, as they're describing the wounds, they're also describing putting in vital reaction. Now, when they say that, that means that this guy was alive when this was done.
Oh, my God.
He could not have been dead. He had to be alive to cause the vital reaction. And when they opened up the cranial cavity, like they do in an autopsy, mm-hmm. numerous cerebral edemas are found. Cerebral edemas caused by, if you had a person that was crushed in an industrial accident, and, it was a very slow crushing. Well, of course, the panic, the everything that's going through their head, their brain kind of like starts to backfire. And little vessels in the brain start to burst because they're, it's agonizing. It's just this painful, unbelievable pain that they know they're going to die. So all this stuff happens to their brain. When they opened this guy's brain, took the brain pan off, this guy's head was full of it. So that was the kind of the icing on the cake as far as this guy was alive when it happened.
What a horror to imagine yourself alive during a dismemberment of that kind. Oh, my God.
Well, and like the guy with the misinformation thing. Okay, nobody would make this up. The police report and the autopsy report and the photographs we have are all signed by the police. I mean, their names are there, the dates. It's sealed. It's on government paper. Mm-hmm. And it's not the only case. It's the best documented case, but it's not the only case. There's a case that took place in the Beni Mazar region of Cairo. 3 families in 2005 were mutilated in exactly the same fashion. Every man, woman, and child was butchered in the same manner. Local police blamed it on a mentally retarded guy who didn't even live in the area. So the townspeople basically figured he was the scapegoat, and that was the end of it. And that was where the case ended. And it's like so many of these cases that we find, they start out well. Don Ecker, I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yes, of course.
Fellow researcher. He was director of Idaho MUFON back then in 1989, and he investigated a report of a mutilated body that was up in a remote area of Bliss, Idaho. The corpse had extensive mutilations to the facial area, complete excisions of the sexual organs and the abdominal organs. And when he got there, it was an absolute predisposition to repress the whole story by the officials. They said nothing more on the case, and that was the end of that.
The case you mentioned in Egypt, that was, did you say 3 families?
Yeah, 3 families.
3 families?
Yeah.
Mutilated in the same fashion?
Yes, exactly the same fashion. Now, I don't know that a mentally retarded fellow could carry all that out. I mean,
no.
the 3 families.
What about, I mean, if you're going to mutilate somebody in that fashion and remove the things that you mentioned that I'd rather not repeat right now, were they there, or were those parts simply gone?
Parts are gone. Parts are never found. Even in cattle mutilations, the parts are never found. None. You would think, there's one picture that just till this day, after I saw it, it just amazes me. If anybody out there is familiar with a cow, they have more than one stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the stomach lies very close to their udders. And there's a picture on the internet, and they can find it. Just look under cattle mutilation. It'll show up sooner or later. And you'll see there's a cow laying on its side, and the udders are removed. And you can see the stomachs. And they're done. It's taken out. The udders are taken off with such precision that they never even nicked the stomach. A friend of mine who's a surgeon, a brain surgeon, said, "I'm not that good." And he said, "I work inside people's heads." And I'm thinking, wow, whatever they're using has got to be so unbelievable. And we have some cattle mutilations where the bodies are found that they've been dropped from great heights.
Yes.
Every bone in their body is broken more than once.
So in other words, these things are done with surgical precision, or what is beyond conventional surgical precision, out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. They're all, and none of these are done like, in like downtown Manila. I mean, this stuff is all would be found in the furthest parts of jungles. There were some cases that we're still looking into, and I'm beginning to believe that they're just somebody's story, that took place in Vietnam during the Vietnam era. And there were some real atrocities that took place there, but this was a MACSOG group, on a mission, special operations group, and they came across a group of aliens loading body parts from a prior firefight into plastic containers. And the firefight ensues between the MACSOG group and the aliens. Of course, the aliens lose, and these guys are all taken back and given a chemical cocktail to make them forget what happened. Then there's another one that came out a little while ago, a naval photographer stationed with an Air Force group to investigate the crash of a B-52. And this B-52 was supposed to be like just laying in the jungle, like somebody had placed it there. It did not crash. And the gentleman states that, he photographed the cockpit area and the control area of the craft, and everybody was still strapped in their seats, yet they were mutilated just like cattle. We did a search of the crashes of B-52s during the Vietnam era. Mm-hmm. No B-52s came down in Vietnam. None that as reported anyway. And the gentleman, I guess there's a couple more. He spoke at some kind of UFO conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. And he's a combat photographer, and he said, "Look," he says, "I just started remembering this stuff, a few years ago," and he thought he'd bring it out. But he said the crew was still strapped in their seats, but they'd all been mutilated, and typically.
Again, in roughly the same fashion you described.
Yep, he says typical clean-cut wounds that you'd see in an animal mutilation is exactly what he photographed. And he said the investigation team that was there, which was from most likely CIA or something like that, they were ordered to burn the plane and the occupants where it sat. Which
really? God. Well, you can imagine the motivation for doing that. What the government cannot explain, it generally covers up. And why not? You don't want the public scared of this sort of thing. I mean, this is real terror. There are a lot of people, Butch, and you might be able to help me out here, who absolutely, almost as a religion, want to believe that aliens are, benign, furry little things that want nothing but the best for us. And I never have believed that. I've never believed it. And I don't believe it now. I think that they're potentially very dangerous, that they've looked at us very carefully. And even if you look at us, subjectively, we're a warlike people. And if they're looking at us that way, they just might not treat us the way we would wish to be treated. And certainly the government wouldn't want us to know that we're potentially in that sort of danger. All right, we're at another break point already. Butch Witkowski is my guest. Mutilations, the subject. From the other side of the world, Manila in the Philippines, I'm Art Bell. This night for George Norrie, who's taking the evening off, we're discussing human abduction and mutilation. Sometimes abductions don't result in mutilation, but instead in implants. As you know, Whitley Strieber is a very, very close friend of mine, and I have no doubt I've discussed in detail with Whitley about the implant in his ear. And had you listened to a previous show with Dr. Roger Lear, you may recall there was an operation done on Whitley in order to remove the implant. His ear would turn beet red suddenly. In fact, I've seen it happen. And they went in with a scalpel to remove this thing, whatever it was. It actually showed up in imaging. They went in to remove it with a scalpel, and when they got close to it with the scalpel, it moved. And it moved sufficiently that the surgeon did not want to continue and scar him up, so they stopped. It's still with Whitley. So sometimes, it's not a mutilation, although I suppose it's a sort of mutilation, to install something in somebody's body. Why would they be doing this? Of course, it's a big, big question mark. The whole thing is a big question mark, and we will continue with Butch and stories of human abduction and mutilation in a moment. Actually, for years, I've been in the camp of these are not our friends. And again, I really want to make reference to the number of fast blasts I'm getting who really object to this. And it's people, I think, who, I'm not sure. It may have to do with fear. It may have to do with the fact that people use the rationale that aliens, if they're there, simply by virtue of the fact that, their technology would have to be so far advanced to get here in the first place, that they would be socially advanced, that they would be warm and fuzzy, they would have a great sense of political right and wrong, PC, that they wouldn't be doing these sorts of things, that they wouldn't need to do these sorts of things. And they really, I guess it's fear. It may be fear. Butch, what do you think?
I think that's a lot of it. I think a lot of it's fear. The cases of abduction where these folks are never found, I mean, that's a big question. And I'd hate to think that they're all coming to the same end as some of the reports that I've looked at. Mm-hmm. But in an age where nuclear and biological and chemical weapons, which if they were deployed could decimate an entire race, we seem to just keep muddling on. I see more people panic over gas prices than the thought of a nuclear holocaust.
Yeah.
So if they panic, if they were told by the government that aliens are here now and have been since forever, I don't think the government's going to be willing to talk too much about that little matter.
No, and then there's this. I mentioned Whitley Strieber. What about abduction and then implants? That's got to fit in somewhere here. It's not always mutilation. It's not always just flat disappearance.
Right.
Sometimes it's, hey, there's something in me.
Oh, yeah, implants, and then there's multiple abductions where, a person is abducted many, many times over their lifetime. And, very little is done to them, an examination here or there, or they say they're brought back to kind of like report on how they've been doing and, almost like old home week. But I just don't think that they're as malevolent, or benevolent rather, as people think they are.
Nor do I.
I used to think if I ever ran into one or bumped into one during an investigation, I want to walk up and shake his hand and invite him in for a beer. Not anymore. I tell people, if you see something and it looks like it's going to land or it's coming close or whatever, run. Just run.
Yeah, but in fact, when you think about it, if you're investigating these things, and I assume from time to time when you're able on scene, there is a stronger possibility for you than there would be for the average person of, having to come to grips with some sort of close encounter. Have you thought about that?
Yeah. Yeah. My family especially, hey, Dad, what happens if you run into one of these guys? What are you going to do? You're getting a little old to run. Well, I guess I'll have to put up a fight. But it's more important, I think, to find out why. The truth and why is a big thing. And, that's one of the reasons we started U4 Cop, to find out, get to the end of it, or at least get to a point where we can get some answers, or we know where to go to get some answers.
Okay. Well, do you have any best guesses, Butch?
No.
The why of it all. In other words, why are they doing this? If you put it all together, if you put together the implants, which obviously are to monitor us, and then you move all the way to mutilations, which are to dissect us, I guess, and find out about us.
Well, the thing I have the problem with the dissection deal is, look, if you dissect one human being, okay, you know exactly what the next human being has. There is no difference in the autopsy of a male and a female, with the exception of the female organs. That's it. The muscles is the same, the rib cages are the same, the bone structure is the same, the skull is the same, the brain is the same. So if they did one, why would you have to do any more? And if you don't want cow, why would you have to do any more?
What about genetics, Butch?
There are so many stories when it comes to the mutilation and the abduction scenarios and phenomenon that, first of all, they come up with, the government made a deal with the aliens that, of course we could take so many, and they reneged on a deal, so now they're keeping them. Then you have Dulce, then they have Dulce Base out there in New Mexico, where they say, they are actually turning these people into hybrids, or having them birth hybrids, or they're just using them for food sources. And, it can get so wild and so far and so stretched that, it just makes the answer go so much further away. I just got a thing on email here. A lady says she has an implant in her knee and would like somebody to come check it out. So, I don't know.
Well, at least, when you have implants, you have some form of evidence. And, of course, I guess even with human mutilations, you have evidence occasionally. I just think the majority of them are not returned. And, again, we've got so many disappearances that are unaccounted for, simply totally unaccounted for, that they could be taking people, and we would not know they were taking people.
Exactly. And it's the numbers are staggering. I mean, so, I only did 10 years. So if I'd go back to the turn of the century and use the same formula, we'd be talking about billions of people, not millions.
Mm-hmm. Are there any ongoing cases right now?
No, none that we can find.
Is there any indication, Butch, that that they've been tailing off? In other words, that there were more years ago and there are not as many now?
Well, I was talking to some researchers down in South America, and a matter of fact, in Brazil, and Portugal, and where else were we talking to them? Argentina. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things, of course, you're familiar with chupacabra. Well, these holes that are being found in certain people that they say were chupacabra victims, mm-hmm. These researchers believe were human mutilation victims. And in those countries, cremation is not a big deal. I mean, it's not like cremation is here. We use cremation a lot here to dispose of bodies. Right. In those countries, burial is a very religious rite, and cremations are very seldom done. Mm-hmm. But it seems like the one investigator told me from Argentina, he says every victim that he's gone to see or tried to see has been already cremated by the time he gets there. He said the body was found yesterday. It was cremated yesterday. He said that's impossible. They can't do that. But it's being done all the time, he said. So where he's going to look at what he thinks is a chupacabra victim, you know, when he's told what the wounds look like, that they're all exactly the same size and they almost look like they've been cauterized or they've been cut with a precision instrument. Well, that's not an animal. I mean, if you look at an animal that's been ravaged by, say, a wolf, I mean, they're shredded, they're torn apart, and the first place they go for is, you know, the underbelly, the soft part of the body, and they just rip and shred and tear. And you know, you're looking at these cattle, and you know, that are in just as good a shape as this guy was found in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Mike in San Diego, Fast Blast, that you dodged my question on genetics. Certainly, not all humans are the same with regard to genetics. That's true. It's very true. But I don't know. It's very hard for me after seeing the evidence on this Brazil case that anything genetically or hybrid-wise or any type of an experiment was carried out that would mean anything to anybody here, because they're doing the same thing to cattle, horses. I mean, I see no correlation there that anything would be being done in a medical sense to advance us or them or anything else. This is just flat-out butchery, and in every case, the same organs are taken, whether it's cattle or human. The same organs are missing. Well, why is that? I mean, what is that? I don't know. Here's something from Randy in Africa. We are a game preserve in Africa. The implants are simply their way of tagging us. Abductions are their biological study of us. Mutilations are poachers, just like here in Africa.
He's probably got a good theory there. And you know, if all these cases of abduction turned into mutilations, there'd be bodies laying all over the place.
That's right.
So, and the tagging, I truly believe he's got a real good point there. I've talked to Dr. Lear. I've been to a couple of his conferences and seen some of his work. And, you know, especially the one case where he took out 3 pieces that were broken. He actually broke them taking them out of this thing, put them away, locked them up. They were under security guard for the evening. He got them out in the morning, and it had grown back together. So
really?
It's something, it's a living thing.
Yeah, I actually had not heard of that one. They grew back together?
Yeah, he gave that, showed those pictures at the X conference in 2009. And I'm sure if you get a hold of Dr. Lear, he'd be more than glad to give you that information. But yeah, he actually broke them, taking them out of the person, and then put them into a vial. And I guess they use some blood serum that they keep it in, so it's thinks it's in the same area. And then he retrieved it the next morning to do some measurements and stuff, and the 3 pieces grew back together. So it was back as it was, one piece before he broke it apart.
When you've got something like that, Butch, why isn't science looking harder at it? In other words, we hear from Dr. Lear, a very credible source, but you would think that's so fantastic, so out of this world, so to speak, that I don't know, the biologists would descend like locusts on good Dr. Lear to study this sort of thing, and yet they don't, and it kind of stops there. Why?
Well, it's just like these mutilations with ufology. You know, these reports were so quickly dismissed as just misinformation and stories concocted by lurid tabloids, and the cattle mutilations were blamed on everybody from religious cults to predators, and the reports today, if you go to give something like this at a conference, say, put out by MUFON or another large organization, first thing they'd do is they'd dismiss it as, you can't do that, it's bad taste, it's just not to be mentioned. Well,
it is hard to talk about. I mean, Butch, sure. Look, when we're on the air like right now, talking about human beings being dissected and mutilated, it's not easy to discuss, and people sort of they're so scared of it. They're so freaked out. They just don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, it's all over the internet. They can find it. They can look at it. It's nothing that, I've concocted. I've taken everything I've gotten from what investigators I could get hold of down there. And the only other case that I'm still trying to get information on is the New Zealand case from 1994. And the guy's got the same wounds as the guy in Brazil in 1988. I mean, I'm looking at a drawing taken, I guess it looks like it was probably a drawing made up from an investigator who was being dictated to the information, but the wounds are identical and in the same spots.
Boy, isn't that strange. I mean, from one side of the world to the other, rare, but we get the bodies. They're mutilated in exactly the same fashion. Now, that just doesn't make sense.
No, and in 1988, Skywatch International, if you remember them.
Sure.
Okay. They reported a case which took place in 1956 at the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. A U.S. Air Force Sergeant, Jonathan P. Lovett, was reported to have been abducted while on a search for some missile parts. He and his commanding officer went down to look for these things after a recent test. And the commanding officer's on one side of the sand dune, and he's on the other side. The commanding officer hears a screaming, runs over to sand dune just to see that this Sergeant Lovett is being pulled into a craft by something wrapped around his leg, and off it goes. 3 days later, his body's found not far from the abduction point at all, a couple hundred yards, and he's terribly mutilated, totally nude. His mutilations read like a horror story, along with his eyes, tongue, lower part of the jaw, anus, genitalia, and other tissues all removed, anus cord out all the way to the colon, exactly the same as cattle. And this is 1956.
Anybody have any thoughts on why this is being done while somebody is still alive? Is there, if you speak to a doctor or a pathologist, is there any reason or any gain that a physician, for example, could imagine in the research area, any gain for doing this while somebody would still be alive versus, post-mortem?
No. When I was talking to a couple doctors about that, some brain surgery is performed while people are awake and alive. There's a lot of surgery done now where, I had cataract surgery done last year, 2 years ago, and I was basically awake for the whole thing.
Well, brain surgery is not a problem. You can be awake with brain surgery because you don't have nerve endings in your brain, so you actually don't feel a thing.
But there was a case in Colorado. And this was two researchers, two UFO researchers, are going to look at a cow that was found. And the one guy's taking his pictures and doing this, that, and the other thing, and the other guy's taking some measurements. And he calls the guy over, his partner over, and he says, "What's wrong with this picture?" And he's looking at the face of the cow. Mm-hmm. And he says, "I don't see anything wrong other than the eyes are missing." He said, "The cow is laying on its side." Correct. He says, "Yes." He says, "The eyes were taken out. The viscous fluid behind the eyes should have run down the side of the animal's face." Correct? He goes, "Yeah." He said, "Why is the viscous fluid in this animal running down its snout and off its nose?" The cow was standing up.
The cow was standing up when it was done.
Yeah, it had to be. That's the only way the fluid would have flowed. If the cow would have been on its side, the fluid would have flowed, off to the side. And this fluid came right down its snout and off its nose. And there it dried.
And again, there's never any evidence found of somebody walking in or walking out. There would have to be some sort of evidence, and there never is. And then there's the predators. They won't touch these carcasses. So something with high strangeness has done this. There simply is no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of these animals are found in very remote areas where it has snowed, and there's not a footprint, not a pad print of any type of animal. Nothing around going, no tire tracks, no no snow moved from chopper, helicopter blades. Like some people say, the government's doing all this. I mean,
the government
crazy.
doesn't need to do this. I've always thought that was such a ridiculous argument.
Sure,
the government can get all the cows it wants.
Exactly. I mean, they could just round up cattle day and night if they want to do that. But
they could raise their own.
And we've had cattle mutilations as early, the last reports that I got were in April and May of this year, and both in Colorado. One was found near a riverbed, a cow, where her udders were removed, and the ear, the inner throat, the whole bit.
Butch, hold tight. I'm sorry, we're at a break point. We've got a break right here. Butch Witkowski is my guest. I'm Art Bell. From Manila in the Philippines, land of 7,007 islands. It's a lot of islands. I'm Art Bell, filling in for George Norrie. And we're discussing something of a very, very sensitive topic, actually. Human abduction and mutilation. And it's not frequently that we talk about this subject. It's difficult to discuss at best. And I want to caution you, if there are children in the room, ought not be at this hour back in the U.S., it might not be a good idea to include them. This is the stuff of nightmares, to be sure. So caution, please. Remember, I've got email if you want to connect with me. I'm artbell at mindspring.com. That's ARTBELL, lowercase, at mindspring.com. And love to hear from you. I'm doing my very best to answer all I can. We were discussing earlier in the show, if you encounter a UFO, run like hell. And then I thought about my own single big experience of the triangle above our head with my dear wife, now passed, Ramona. And I recall that not only did we not run, but we were frozen in place. We were in shock. And by the way, the shock lasted long after the experience. But as this thing passed over our head, we were standing adjacent to the car that we had stopped, and we just froze in place, absolutely froze in place. And I don't think we could have moved had we wanted to. And it strikes me as kind of silly at the time, in a sense, but it was shock, absolute shock. And after it was over, Ramona was Catholic, very religious. She didn't want to talk about it, and that remained the case for years afterwards. She didn't want to talk about it, and in a way, I don't blame her. But I do recall the state of shock, and it just froze us, absolute froze us in place as this thing approached, then passed directly overhead, and then kept going. We just stayed frozen for I don't know how long, 5, 10 minutes, something like that. It was interesting. Butch, what do you think about that? Run like hell is a good thing to be suggesting here on the radio, I suppose, if you believe they're not benign. But really, that kind of thing does absolutely put you in shock.
Yeah, and there's been so many other things happen with people that have stood underneath or gotten really close to them, where they've gotten radiation burns. A father and son down in the Bristol, Tennessee area suffered some pretty serious burns, and I guess the father now has developed cancer. And then, the Texas case where the 2 women and the child were burned when they got within range of one. So it's not so much the human mutilation factor or whatever. It's we just don't know what they are. We don't know if they can hurt you biologically or burn you, or they're radioactive. We don't know. The gentleman that Sergeant Pendleton that touched the UFO over at Rendlesham, ran his hand across it. He said it felt warm. I don't think I would have done that. I mean, he's a brave guy, but I wouldn't have done it. I don't think I'd want to touch something like that. You don't know what you're going to get. One animal that was done in back in '67. I mean, the lady it was her horse, and she wanted to pick up a piece of the flesh that had been laying there, and some kind of green ooze came out of it and burned her. So, I don't know. I don't think I'd want to be doing anything around them.
Even Robbie, who fast blast from Tokyo, Japan, says Stephen Hawking recently cautioned about the likelihood that E.T. is not friendly. So if a mind like Hawking thinks they may not be friendly, then the rest of us have to consider it a very strong possibility.
Yes, and Stephen Hawking, I've read a few of his papers, and the guy's brilliant. And and if he's going to tell me to stay away, I'm going to take his word for it.
Mm-hmm. Me too. But as I pointed out, and I'm not kidding, I absolutely went directly into a kind of a state of shock that lasted for some hours after the encounter. I couldn't have moved. I don't think I could have moved. And I guess I wanted to take it all in. I don't know, but I couldn't have moved. I can tell you that much. I suppose if something untoward had occurred, if, some beam had come down or something, of course, by then it would probably have been too late. But I something to cause me to really be in fear, I would have run, I guess. But I do understand how people just get frozen. Well,
about maybe 6-8 months ago, I was privy to see another, and this one was quite different because it was pretty much daylight out yet, and I was leaving work and heading to my car, and I saw this very bright, brilliant white, almost like a flashbulb type of light coming across the horizon, and it looked like it was slowing down. And I'm like looking at my car, and I'm where I'm standing, it's a good 500 yards. I'm thinking, can I get to the car and get to the camera and photograph this and get back in? No way. They'll find me laying there out of breath. The ambulance will just cart me away. And I'm looking at this thing, and it does slow down. And it turns upright, and it turns the brightest red I've ever seen in my life and shoots straight up out of sight. And there was a gentleman standing aside of me, and I looked at him, and he was just agape. The mouth was down around the chest area, and his eyes were focused forward and straight up. And I said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "That's the biggest helicopter I ever saw." Mm-hmm. And I said, "There's no helicopter." He says, "In my mind, that's a helicopter. I'm out of here." And he left. So I really had reservations about making that report. I'm thinking, nobody's going to believe this. So I thought, no, the hell with it. I'll make the report. So I make the report. And 5 minutes later, one of the investigators calls me and says, "Hey, I got an identical report to yours, and the time difference is only 1 minute off." And the guy and his wife were 82 miles north of where I was standing.
Wow.
And I'm going like, you know what? I'm going to quit looking up. And people ask all the time, how do you see these things? Look up. That's.
And most people don't. Most people go about their life looking at the road ahead of them or whatever is in front of them, but not up. You're absolutely right, Butch. Butch, I'm curious, where does your research go from here? You get to a certain point. You've researched these mutilation cases and so forth.
Well, we'll keep the mutilations as an open case, and we'll always be checking on that. And of course, the case of the gentleman up in Montoursville is an open case with us. And we have a couple other open cases, and we have some new cases. We just got done with a case in at the Bell Bend nuclear plant here in Pennsylvania, where a lady who is very credible, as she teaches police officers for a living, and she's traveling home on a road, and it's beautiful blue sky, and there's just this one odd-looking cloud in the sky. And, she says it's the only cloud in the sky, so she grabs her camera and takes a picture of it and sends it to me after she downloads it and says there's something inside this cloud. So I look at it, and a couple of my guys look at it, and they're all going like, yeah, there's something there, but, we don't know what it is. It just looks like a line. And so I sent it over to a fellow in England who took a look at it, who's an expert at that and is part of that Mars group that over there that researches the Mars photographs. And he says, well, there's actually three objects in the cloud. At the bottom, the large line you see is a large saucer-type object. Above it is, at the 11 o'clock position, is a smaller saucer-type object with a beam going down to the larger one, and off to the right at about the 2 o'clock position, you have another one coming into view. And I'm like, that's great. And then so, now we're on the nuclear thing, and I want to tell you, there's more sightings of UFOs around nuclear plants in this country than I ever imagined. They're constantly showing up. And I'm thinking, like, okay, what do they need at a nuclear plant? I mean, these guys have propulsion that takes them through the galaxy at rates of speed, or they're interdimensional or whatever. But why the interest in the nuclear plants? And then you go back
Butch,
where they did they shut down complete nuclear bases where there were nuclear weapons.
I'm aware of that. Butch, if you go back to the beginning of ufology, the modern beginning of ufology, it sort of coincides with the first detonation of a nuclear weapon. Now, you would think from any distance, the above-ground detonation of a nuclear weapon would get the attention of anybody interested in what's going on this little green planet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't remember where I either read it or heard it at a conference or something like that, and where somebody says, they can just imagine the somebody up in space looking down when that was first detonated, going, "Oh my God, the kids have found the matches," and that's probably a very good reason. How many times did we think during the Cold War that any day would be, a nuclear holocaust?
The last day. Butch, I've got to take another break, but when I come back, I'm wondering if statistically, with regard to abduction, you found any commonality in sex, age, race, religion. As you put the stats together, do we come up with anything that makes any sense at all? We'll be right back. I can get so wrapped up in a topic that I just let a break go right by, a commercial break, and that's, it's something the network really hates. So anyway, Butch, sex, age, race, religion, anything else? Any common factors that...
About the most common factor was young adults aged 13 to 19
really?
was the most of the people that were missing. But again, like I said before, as they cleaned out and started to get down to the whereabouts and the findings, that same group was the group that was most likely to be found.
The runaways.
Yep,
runaways, sure.
and followed by them, it was females in the aged 30 to 40 group, and males started again at very young ages. Also, it went back into that 95% of being found, but carried on with males in their 40s and 50s as missing. And a lot of that, when you look at the reports, it almost looks like a lot of them had dementia or the beginnings of Alzheimer's, because they all had medical records of pertaining to those illnesses.
Okay. I wonder if that's the reason for the disappearance, or that's what's being studied.
I think that's what's being studied. I don't think that's the reason for the disappearance. There's just too many people. I mean, if we were talking about, 100,000 over 10 years, well, that's nothing. That could be just people walking off.
Okay. Butch, do you think that our government is well aware of what's going on?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yes.
Do you think, as the old rumor goes, that a deal was, in fact, made?
Yes, I do. So little attention is paid to what's going on that, if it was a government that was being forthright and I walked up to them and gave them these cases and said, hey, look, this is happening here, they'd put out a warning immediately, or they'd start looking, or they'd start doing something. But this stuff, like I said before, it's just considered by the government and ufologists in general as bad taste, not to be mentioned, never happened, never going to happen.
When do you think this deal was done?
50s, early 50s.
The 50s.
And for them to come forward now and say, that's like people with disclosure ask me all the time, when is there going to be disclosure? That's never going to happen. Do you realize what the government would have to admit to?
Yes, I do.
From Roswell to whatever happened last week or tonight, I got a report of one in Washington State at 9 o'clock this evening. A UFO buzzed somebody for over a minute. So, are they going to admit to that? No, I could call Washington State and state police or anybody else out there, and I'm going to get the same answer. Nope, never happened. Don't have anything on it. But yet they have radar tracks. They have pilots. Leslie Keene just came out with her thing. and her book UFOs, where she's got generals and pilots and telling all they know, and you would think the government would be jumping right up there. Now, some governments have come forward, and I was
about to say, not all governments are as the U.S. government.
No, and I think England's big problem was Nick Pope. Nick Pope was out there, and he was beyond that. I guess they have kind of a limit on their Secrecy Act, where we don't. So they had to come up with something, and then of course Spain followed, and even Iran. They came out with information, and Portugal, and there's a number of countries that are coming forward. But I don't think you're going to see that from us. I really don't. And if it does happen, I'll go on your show and I'll be the first one to say, "Look, okay, I'm an idiot. I should have saw this coming," but I just don't see that coming.
All right, Jane in Killeen, Texas says, if a patient is alive while the mutilation is taking place, adrenaline would be rife in the blood. Maybe they want the adrenaline too, so I don't know about that, but is, in fact, that one result? Certainly that's true, although there isn't much blood left, is there?
No.
In what little blood there is left, you would think there would be a great deal of adrenaline.
The blood in the autopsy report, there's very little mention about the blood because I guess there was so very little there. And I guess what was there, according to the autopsy, and we had a little trouble with the wording, it looked like the guy was trying to say that it had been contaminated. Now, I don't know what he means by contaminated. Was he cleaning, or was somebody clean, or just cleaned an instrument, or was cleaning an instrument, say, with alcohol or betadine or something like that, and got to that blood, or was there just not enough to test? But I would find that hard to believe because you can test a drop of blood. But there's no mention of that in the autopsy report at all. But she is right. They would be loaded with adrenaline, and there's nothing.
Are sightings? You keep track of sightings as well,
Sure.
and you're a good friend of Peter Davenport. What's going on with sightings? Are sightings on the increase or decline?
Sightings seem to be on the decline, but that's probably normal. It just seems like when the weather's hot and we have a lot of storms in areas, it just seems like when I look at records from last year as to this year time, there were, again, the reports started to slow down, and then they'll start picking up again in around October. And more sightings, of course, because of clearer skies. You won't have all the haze from heat, so there are clearer skies and colder. And, that's the best time to see these things, when it's clear and cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say they're probably about the same. I don't see a whole lot of difference across the country. Pennsylvania is probably right where they were last year, according to what I've been looking at. And the Pennsylvania group is, they do a good job of, MUFON group does a good job of keeping track of their stuff. Mm-hmm. So, when I look at it, it tells me that, I can go back to last year and it measures up pretty much the same. But it seems like a lot of the swing on sightings has been in the, again, in the Texas area, and now we've got a couple reports out of Arizona, which, is, if we got 2 or 3 of those a month out of Arizona, that was strange. But I've gotten 2 tonight, so.
Fletch in Los Angeles says, think cold and think remote like an alien. Think of how we dissect frogs. We don't do one. We do many each year for students and study them. And he's right, we do.
And that's another good point, just like the guy from Africa.
Yeah, we know what's in a frog, but for our students, we do it again and again and again and again. So who's to know about their motivation?
Right. And one of the things that was strange, though, about the case in Brazil, which everybody that looked at the reports found the same thing, where the guy was found, of course, all the sexual organs and the anus had been cored out and removed and all that. Now, they had to take his pants off to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't do it through his underwear. But
right.
When they find the body, the underwear is intact. It is pulled back up. Now,
In the case of a serial killer, that usually indicates some sort of remorse or something.
Right.
But in this case...
Yeah, what do you call it in this case? Is it remorse? And why would the body be just dumped out in the open like that? I mean, do they have that much disregard for us? Or, are we like so many gnats that they can just swat and get rid of? Or I
frogs?
I just don't know.
Yeah. All right, hold it right there, Butch. We're coming up on a break, and what I want to do is I want to go to the phones here shortly, and we'll get the numbers up for you as we come back from break. But if you have a question about abduction, about mutilation, or even better, if you have some sort of personal experience, we would particularly like to hear from you. I know this audience is centered on topics of this sort. Many of you have knowledge of things that have occurred like this. So if you're one of those, we'd particularly appreciate a phone call. As I mentioned, as we come back, we'll lay the numbers out for you. From Manila, Philippines, I'm Art Bell. A lot of people are asking, where is the photographic evidence? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, because it's tough to look at, there's a lot of it. If you go to Google and just put in human mutilations, it'll take you to Brazil, among other places, where you can actually see the photographs. But warning, this is tough stuff. And, as a general rule, an absolute rule, really, you wouldn't see this sort of thing displayed on U.S. news anywhere. But, of course, the evidence is on the web, and you can see it and decide for yourself. So for those who ask about evidence, it's there. Just a little bit of caution when you're looking. We're going to open the phone lines. That's occurring right now. So if you've got something relevant, as in some sort of experience, or perhaps you have a story, love to hear from you. Those are the numbers. We'll be right back with all of you. On a unrelated topic, just before we go to the phones, George was absolutely right about that. He was talking about the government wanting to know about every penny you have. And this last time that I did my taxes, of course, I'm here in the Philippines, and I have bank accounts here in the Philippines, and they passed a new law, and they want to know about any foreign bank accounts you have. And, I thought about that, and I almost didn't do it. I was so angry. It's kind of like this. This is money that I earned. This is money that I've already paid my taxes on, right? So if I wanted to take that money and go throw it in the Potomac River, I could do that, presumably. Not that I would, but I could do that. Or I could go handing it out to the poor. I could do a million different things with my money. But once you've paid your taxes on your money, what damn business is it of the government's what you're doing with it? Now, I went ahead and I, did as my accountant said that I should do, and reported my foreign bank accounts. But the more I thought about it, the more angry I became. And I actually thought about not reporting. But I didn't do that. When you're a high-profile person, they love making examples of them. So I've always been very fastidious about reporting. It's just that what business is it of theirs what you do with money that you've already paid your federal taxes on? It just doesn't make sense to me. All right, we're going to go to the phones. Butch, are you ready? This is a tough topic, and I don't know what people are going to have to say about it, but we're about to find out.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Let's begin with Shelley in northern Kentucky, I believe. Shelley, welcome to Coast AM.
Hello, Art and Butch. Well, okay, let's see how I start this. You remember that the government supposedly years ago didn't want people to know about aliens because it could affect their belief in God. And when you mentioned Ramona before being a devout Catholic, I just had to, I'm a Catholic with way too many questions. And, the only way I can put this, you love Gordon Lightfoot, and he has a line in Edmund Fitzgerald, does anyone know where the love of God goes? And you can put any disastrous, horrible thing in the blank. But I'm wondering, where do you stand? How do you two feel? Is he just sitting there watching this? Are we like some planetary ant farm? I mean, is this amusing to watch all this? Because where is the Good Shepherd? I don't know. It's very frightening, and we don't know what what this is or what's being aimed at us, but there's an awful lot going on, and it's like
I'm not sure how to answer that. And it's kind of like asking, why does God allow little babies to die? You get answers, like it's His plan, or you have to have faith, and so those are some of the questions that I also have, and I think any intelligent person would ask. I really envy those people with so much faith that they have no questions. You want to even take a pass at that, Butch?
Well, also being Catholic, I have a lot of questions also. But it's just like I was listening to a speaker one time, and the question was put to him almost just like she just put it to us. And he said, he says, you have to be really naive to think that the Almighty, whoever He or she may be, only created us in this vast universe and millions of universes and billions of stars. And he says, I don't think we're all that special. He said, I just believe that he said that there's others out there, and eventually in time we're going to meet them, good, bad, or indifferent. And just some thought.
And I think that's exactly how they're going to be, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
That whole range. All right, let's go to Los Angeles, California. Christian, you're on the air with Butch Witkowski and Art Bell.
Hello, Art Bell. It's a pleasure to speak with you. You're such a legend. And I had a question for you and also for Nick, and that is with Whitley Strieber, since you know you're very good friends with him, he seems to think that the interaction between humans and extraterrestrials is something where we can learn from each other, a better understanding, kind of an intellectual understanding. But recently I saw the film The Fourth Kind, and it scared the bejesus out of me. In fact, when I came home that night, I couldn't sleep. I was terrified.
Your phone is fading away. You need to get closer to the base.
Oh, hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw the film The Fourth Kind, and when I came home, it scared me to death. I couldn't sleep all night. And it seems now, it's like what you're saying about these mutilations, that there probably actually is truth to that film, that really, in a way, E.T. is not cute and cuddly and friendly and intellectual, but it sounds like that, in a way, we need to be very fearful. And it's just I kind of find that very, very disturbing. And again, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, Art Bell, you're such a legend, and I wish you well. And I just want to say thank you for this show, because the way the government has controlled the media now, you're probably one of the very few outlets where there's actually the freedom of speech is still alive and well. And we need to, especially UFOs. I mean, this is a very important topic that the government has been covering up since 1947. But I'd like to know kind of how you feel about what I said about really, is this the intellectuals, or the extraterrestrials? It's something to really be, I think, for humanity. Do we really need to be fearful of this? And again, thank you for your time, and it was a pleasure talking to you guys, especially you, Art. All the best to you.
Take care, and enough with the legend stuff. It sounds so post-mortem. So, Butch, again, you want to take a pass at that one?
I don't think that we're going to learn any more than we've already learned. I just do not see this coming forth. These guys are going to step off of whatever they're flying, and they're going to cure cancer and Alzheimer's and crippling diseases and for the betterment of mankind. I have to see a lot more before I'm going to start to go in that angle.
And yet earlier you suggested they were studying things like Alzheimer's and so forth.
Yeah, I think they're studying a lot. I think it's not just. I guess the problem I have with the studying is that they keep studying the same thing over and over and over. It'd be different if all of a sudden we started finding or learning that the brains were missing. Okay, that's another story. But these are the same things: the tongues, the jaws, the throats, the ears, the eyes, the sexual organs, the intestines. anus, it's the same thing. It does not change. There is no change in any case.
Right. Well, okay. There are some who speculate with regard to cattle mutilations and human ones that perhaps what they're doing is monitoring our environment through
sure are toxins in the air, or that would take in the nuclear. Are they getting ready to come to this planet and they want to check us out and check out what we're going to be like, or is this going to be a place that they could survive, or they could even visit without the War of the Worlds type of they get a flu virus and they all die.
Yeah, exactly. Or are we in the process of changing this into a place that would not be habitable for them?
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, let's go to a wild card line. I think Oak Island, North Carolina, you're on the air.
Hey, Mr. Bell, thank you for taking the call.
Certainly.
I've waited a long time to talk to one of you guys because I know you're not going to make fun of me. But I'm a firm believer that my whole family's been abducted at one time or another. I've personally have removed an implant from the left side of my nose. After I took it out of my nose, I really don't have any recollection of being abducted or anything done to me except for some strange bruises and some marks. But there's 3 places on the left side of my body that I believe have an implant in it now, and they vibrate from time to time. And I don't know if anybody else has ever complained about these things vibrating, but mine do. And I think they put them in a tougher place for me to get to this time. And my girls, I've got 3 little children, and they draw pictures, and they're scary as hell. And I'm so afraid and so frightened and so nervous right now to talk to you. It's not even funny, but I wanted to talk to you guys about this. My wife, she complains frequently about being drawn toward the ceiling and being abducted. I think she's the first one that they started to take, and she describes these little things that come into our bedroom, not every time, but a lot more frequently than others. The little things come into our room, and that's what take her. And she describes being taken toward the ceiling. And we've moved from one end of this country to the other. We spent a year in South Dakota. She's a Sioux Indian. And we lived on her reservation for a year. And those things are out there, too. And they took us while we were out there. And they're not very nice. They're mean as hell to us. And they treat my little children like you wouldn't believe. And they leave triangular-shaped marks on their bodies. And they look like little brown moles, and they don't always disappear. And they'll wake up with bruises in a triangular shape in different parts of their bodies, on their arms and their chest. And
well, sir, let me ask you a question. If you think that you've been abducted and have had implants inserted, have you had any imaging work done?
No, I have, but not specifically for that. But I took something out of my nose, and it was a little clear glass, looks like a little glass shard. It was the shape of a piece of pencil lead. It just wasn't that big. It wasn't that large in diameter, and I took it from myself. And after that, there's 3 places on the left side of my body that it feels just like a telephone when it vibrates, and it scares me to death. And I never know when it's going to happen. I'm standing outside right now on my job, and my wife worked down here with me as well, because she couldn't stand it anymore. She swears that they're down here. They come to visit her. Now, what their particular interest is of her over the rest of us, I couldn't tell you. But when they started taking my children, I wanted to wait up on them. And if I could get a hold of one of my weapons when those things show up, there'll be one for somebody to investigate. I can tell you that right now, because I'm not. I don't know who to talk to. I'm scared to death to mention it to people because everybody will make fun of you. And I know you guys won't.
Sir, where are you located at?
I'm Oak Island, North Carolina, on the East Coast. And
okay.
The other thing we've got down here.
You need to get a hold of the North Carolina MUFON, okay?
Okay.
If you go online, or if you can't get it, you can email me. I'll get you the address and the person to talk to. They have great investigators down there. And as far as that vibration is concerned, do you have a magnet?
Yes, sir.
Take a magnet and run that magnet over that area and let them know if that vibration stopped or started when you did that with the magnet. And as far as those marks on your children's bodies, you need to photograph those, preferably with a 35-millimeter camera or a good digital camera, and get good, clear shots, and get a hold of the people there at North Carolina MUFON, and they will take care of that, and they will help you.
Okay.
All right. Okay, listen,
Well,
thank you very, very much for the call. He sounded absolutely honest to me, and kind of scared. Let's go way up north. Alberta, Canada brings Gloria. You're on the air, Gloria.
Oh, hi there, Art and Butch.
Hi.
I have a strange experience with an ET. I woke up at dawn, and I'm sitting wide awake on my bed, and on my left is a long gray arm with a hand dangling with very pointy nails. And I look the other way and think, oh, no. And I look back, and it brought its hand up, and the palm was quite pink, actually, and these long nails. Then it was down to business. It took my left pointer finger in a little saucer, and in this saucer were little black specks like coarse black pepper, and they went into my finger in an orderly manner. Then when that was finished, it said to me in my head, do not look at me. Then it was my right finger that went in the saucer, and the same thing happened, and when that was finished, they were gone. It was gone. But I know it's been back because it leaves a trademark. I've had scratches on my left palm, and the top one has left a scar, and there was blood on my covers. And the next time, it's on my shoulder, and the scars are there from the sharp, pointy nails. And I wonder if there's anyone else that's had an experience like that. And I was only 75 years old. I was not young, so this is more of a mystery to me. And the next day, it was very scary for me. At the time, I was not afraid.
Okay.
I've never heard anything like that.
Nor have I. But this is the kind of thing you get when you open lines and you listen to people. You just get these stories that are just astounding. And frankly, you know, the lady sounded completely lucid, as did the gentleman before her.
I think they were
very lucid. But I mean, if you call 911 or something and you tell a story like this, you know, the people in the white coats are going to show up.
Yeah, they'd hang up on you for sure.
Well, I don't know that they'd hang up on you, but they, you know, you'd be in some danger of getting an examination, not by aliens, but people, you know, with degrees.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right.
Yeah. Judith in Ohio. Hi, you're on the air with Butch and Art Bell.
Hi. Yes, I am calling you from Ohio. I'm being shy now. I listen quite often. I work second shift, and I stay up half the night just so I can hear you guys. I've had a lot of things in my life, and my parents have had things, and I've had a strange life. But the one thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight, let's see, it's been many years now because my son was just like 7, and now he's in his 30s, so it's almost 30 years ago. I found a foot. My son and his little friend were sled riding. My sister lives out in the country. I had gone over there to take them sled riding, and there was nobody home. The house was locked, and I was walking in a little grove of trees next to where the boys were. And in the snow was a foot. And the first thing I thought was like, oh, somebody's killed a deer, and the dogs have dragged the bones in. I picked it up, and then I got real scared for a second because I thought it was human. But I didn't have any medical training then, which I have now. But it wasn't a human foot. And even then I thought, well, this isn't made right.
Stop for a moment and describe what you saw, please.
Okay. Yeah, I sure will. It was fresh bone. It wasn't old. It was fresh. Like if you go to the meat market and you get a bone for your dog.
Yeah.
And it had a little bit of gristle on it. It didn't have any skin or any hair or anything. And there was like one joint where the heel is. The length of the whole thing was maybe 14 inches, 12 to 14 inches long. There was the heel part, and then from the heel, there was like one bone that would come out, clear up to a little joint, and then there was like there were several of these, not like 2 or 3, but maybe like 4 to 6 or 7 of these.
Listen, I've got to break this. I'm going to ask you to hold on through the break. Can you afford to do that?
Oh, sure.
All right, we're coming up to a break, so stay right where you are. Butch, stay where you are. From Manila in the Philippines, I'm Art Bell, and we'll be right back. Butch Witkowski is my guest. We're discussing something very delicate, very sensitive, human abduction, human mutilation, and everything that sort of goes along with it. And we've got a very interesting caller on the line who found what amounts to a foot of some sort, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Doug in Richfield, Minnesota, fast blasts me the following. Keep in mind that the aliens might be very peace-loving, but know what that means. Peaceful to their own kind. Quakers are very peaceful. They're a very peaceful sort, but their livestock might agree. We'll be right back. All right, back now with Butch Witkowski and our guest from Ohio, Judith, our caller. Judith, you're back on the air again. This foot, or whatever it is, can you be fairly certain it was not animal or human?
No. Okay, first off, I didn't make it very clear. I was walking in the woods. I first thought it was a deer. I did pick it up. It felt about the same weight as you would think bone would feel, and it had from the joint at the back. It had maybe 4 to 6 or 7. I didn't count because there was snow on them. From the heel to what would appear to be like a toe joint, they were just one thing, like it'd be pencils or something. I mean, there wasn't a bunch of little joints like on the back of your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the one joint, and then there was like 2 inches of what would be like a toe, but they didn't angle like human toes do. It was the whole thing was like a triangle, okay, like a long skinny triangle, and it had snow packed around it. And from the heel type end, there was one bone coming up, and I'm holding this thing. First, I thought it was like a deer. I picked it up, and I thought, oh my God, it's a human foot. And I figured somebody killed somebody, and they were going to kill me and the kids. I was real scared for a second. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, because I thought feet were made like hands, with all the bones, and there wasn't all those bones. And then there was no like big toe and little toes. Everything was the same. And from the heel part, it came up about 2 inches, and it was just one bone. And I thought it was supposed to be 2, like there is in the wrist. It's obviously more familiar with the hand. And it was one bone. And the weirdest part of this whole thing is it was like solid bone. It didn't have an inside opening. And when you looked at it, if you looked straight down on the 2-inch high part, it was solid, the same creamy color, but inside like a 1/4 of an inch, there was like an 1/8 of an inch of pink all the way around, like a little circle of pink. But the strangest thing of this is, if you turned the thing so you were looking at it on the same plane, it was like it wasn't broke off or something. It was cut off. It was cut like fresh board where you go, and then at the very end there's a little tick, on the board where it doesn't cut quite clear. This had that little tick thing. So I don't know where it came from. I know it wasn't an animal. I've looked at all kinds of pictures of deer paws and, bear paws and everything. I took it. I was going to wrap it in a towel because my brother-in-law worked for a vet, and he always wanted to be a vet and had to go to the Second World War. And he grew up on a farm. I thought, well, maybe Jim will know. And if he doesn't, I was still married to a professor, and if he didn't know, because I thought he knew everything, we would take it up to Case Western or somewhere. It wasn't a matter of carbon dating because it was fresh bone. And I wrapped it in a towel that I had in the car, and I was going to put it in the car, and my son, and he held it too. We both held it. It wasn't just something we looked at.
Right.
And he was freaking out, and he never really freaked out about things. And Bradley says, oh, Mom, don't put that in the car. I don't want that in the car with us. So I stuck it in the crock of the tree along the corner of my sister's house as high as I could reach.
Mm-hmm.
And this is way out in the country. And I took Denny home, and I came right back, and my brother-in-law and sister and everybody was there. Now, the summer before, there was lights in the woods, which is another, I don't know if they're connected or not with this, and without going into that. But there was some weird light in the woods.
Okay, well, what became, for the sake of time here, what became of it? What happened?
Well, it was gone. That's what I'm trying to say. I went in the house, and, my sister's saying, well, have some coffee. I had a quick cup of coffee. I said, I got to go out and get this thing before it gets dark, because it was in the winter. It was starting to get dark. And I told them, that I had this thing in the tree, and they all kind of laughed at me. And they didn't remember the light they saw in the summer. I guess I'm getting into something I didn't mean to. My parents had followed a light, 16 or 20 years before that, they followed a light one night for miles.
Right, but this thing was gone.
That memory was gone from their that same day. I went to my mom's because I was upset about this whole thing. And my mom and my stepdad had never, ever wavered in this memory of following this light. And the memory was gone till the day they died. That's kind of scary. But
okay.
Anyway,
listen, thank you. We're going to have to go, but thank you very, very much for the call. What a shame. I can understand the son didn't want it in the car, but what a shame something like that was not preserved and identified. Butch, have you heard of cases like that where a body part just that's apparently not human or animal has been found?
No, not at all. No, not in any of the research I've done have we come across anything like that.
Boy, you never know what you're going to get on these lines. All right, to Davis, Oklahoma. Farlane, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
During the early year, 94, I think it was around March, I was on a trip from Oklahoma to Illinois, and I had enough time to report to work that morning. And on the way there, I don't know exactly what happened. I just realized that I woke up while I was driving, and I was looking at my dash lights. I was confused. I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. And then it occurs to me, holy crap, I'm driving a car. And I grabbed the steering wheel, put my foot on the gas pedal, and I looked in my rearview mirror. There's no one around on the interstate. This is somewhere in Missouri. And I'm driving and driving and driving. I realized I am not going to make it in on time. I had to find a payphone to call my boss because I didn't have a cell phone back then in 94. And he just told me to take the day off. I arrived to my destination 3.5 hours later than I should have. And it was just one of those things. I just had to shrug my shoulders, try to figure out what in the world happened. I have no idea. But
so in other words, you had a big hunk of missing time.
3.5 hours of missing time. But I wasn't familiar with the term missing time back then. And 10 years later, 2 of my children, along with 2 of the neighbor children, saw a disc hovering near my house. And they all saw it, and I called MUFON. I got Sam Maranto, the state section director for Illinois MUFON, came and investigated that. And that's when I started finding out about all the different terminology and the missing time. And I would love to try to go underneath some regression hypnotism or something to figure out what happened to me.
There's a group in California called Opus, OPUS. And if you give them a call, you can get their number right off the internet. They have a direct line. Give them a call, and they'll set you up or get you to the right person to do a regression.
Hey, that'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for the call. Opus, huh?
Yeah.
So there really are people who can help you out if you've had this sort of thing occur.
Yeah. There's people on there's people on the West Coast, and then of course you have Dr. Jacobs here on the East Coast.
Sure.
And, Dr. Jacobs, Dr. David Jacobs, and Opus, they do a fine job, and we've related a couple cases to them over the years.
Okay, to Jason in Palm Springs. Hi, Jason, you're on the air.
Oh, hi. I haven't talked to you since I called up one time and told you I could hear you getting sicker as the night went on. You needed to take the day off and play some of the ones that you had already done, and the rest is history. So how have you been over the years?
I'm fine.
Now, at that time, I was looking into earthquake thing that I'm doing, and consequently, I was out at night all the time. Now, let me give you some back data on this, and that is that I am more than a hermaphrodite. I am double-sexed. I was born double. And I needn't tell you that this has led to hundreds of abductions. I don't need to go into because I'm sure everyone has a vivid imagination. And
so you're actually double-sexed. In other words, everything of both.
2 ovaries, 2 testes, and all the accoutrements thereof.
Got it. And for that reason, you think they're particularly interested in you, and you say you've been abducted again and again?
Oh, my, yes. Yeah, all the time. And what happens sometimes is that they forget to tell the little guys that picked you up to erase my memory. Because they get excited when they get a new person in out at the base. They me and show me off, and they get excited, and because they've never seen anything like this before, and they forget to tell them to cut it off. As a result, I have a lot of memory of the abductions and what they're doing. And this may sound crazy, but I can show you where the underground bases are. There are fallen angels, and there are coexist with the military. They're allowed to because they're giving them data that makes them big, strong armies. And the whole thing is known to the government.
Okay, well, you've set us off in a good direction. I'm going to leave it at that. Butch, it is interesting. He said fallen angels. Well, there are theories from fallen angels to aliens to time travelers. That's a big one. And interdimensional beings. So I guess you pretty much think it's aliens that are doing this, or is it a combination of all of the above?
Pretty much aliens.
Pretty much aliens.
Yep.
Okay.
I found I've read a lot of stuff and looked at a lot of reports on, Nephilim and the fallen angels, and although some of the theories seem like they're tailor-made to give you an answer, they just take you off in a totally different direction. Next thing you know, it's just a religious thing or...
Well, I think people tend to ascribe whatever their belief system tells them they think it would be to that. But you're sticking with aliens. Okay, yeah. Drew in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you're on the air with Butch Witkowski and Art Bell.
How you doing, Art?
Okay.
Been a fan for like 10 years. I think I got something to say tonight. Okay. Sometimes, it might be aliens, but sometimes it may be, the Illuminati, and they could hypnotize to make you believe it was an alien. And I'm saying if you own a copy of the Bible, you allow the Illuminati's curse to abduct or whatever. I'll explain. Okay, now John Todd, a former ex-Illuminati, states all original big money music recordings get cursed on an altar on a full moon, and they channel like Satan and his army all to follow every single copy. And John Todd also stated that the Vatican's altar was designed from a previously built satanic altar. A lot of Illuminati have reported that they have went to the Vatican to get promoted, initiated, and stuff like that. So I'm saying that I'm guessing the Vatican's so-called original documents are cursed to allow Satan's army to follow every single copy of the Bible. If you own a copy, you give permission to the Illuminati to do whatever.
Okay, well, I appreciate the call, and here we go off in the religious direction.
And that's exactly what happens with a lot of that. The fallen angels, it almost seems like people are looking to not so much find an answer, but to blame or back up their belief system. And,
it's human nature.
And it's just human nature. I mean, they go one way or the other. They either blame the churches and denominations for something they've done in the past, and God knows, that Catholics, we've killed more people than Cecil B. DeMille in the name of religion. And the same thing with aliens. It's just the belief system, and it's like I always try to tell people, try to read as much as you can. There's enough good information out there to set your mind in a proportion where you can at least tell the difference between an alien and a fallen angel or a Nephilim or giants or whatever they're going to bring up next week.
Mm-hmm.
But
all right,
I'm going to stick with the aliens.
Okay, you can't really rule any of it out.
No, you can't. But until there's better evidence, I'm going to stick with the alien guys.
Good enough. Pasadena, California brings Roger. You're on the air, Roger. Welcome.
Hey, Yurt. Thanks. Appreciate it. How you doing, buddy?
Sure. I'm fine.
Wow, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm listening to a lot of the things that are being said about the operating and the animal, dissecting the animals up and the humans. But it sounds like a lot of just scientific experimentation. The way we would look at an animal or a person that we'd never seen before, we'd naturally want to dissect it, take it apart, reverse engineer it, see how it works. The same thing with a piece of advanced technology that just landed in a field. We'd take it apart, reverse engineer it, see how we could benefit from it, either socially or medically.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've read about reports, people being abducted that have been brought back, they tend to be repeat abductees, and they come from a family of or generations of people that have had similar experiences, almost like they're trying to trace the DNA or the line of the DNA, how it's evolving and what's affecting it and how. And also a lot of these things are described as being as having no reproductive organs. So the only way that they can propagate or continue their line is through cloning, from what I've read. So maybe they're trying to find a way to get our organs to work in their bodies or in their cloning processes.
That's as good a theory as any.
Yeah.
Butch, what do you think?
Well, and it's a good theory because cow blood can be substituted for human blood for a very short period of time, and all these cattle, no blood. So are they trying to upgrade their immune system or prepare themselves for our toxic systems that we have here? Who knows? But I think he's got a good point there.
Mm-hmm. Angie in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Good morning, Angie. You're on the air.
Hi, Art. Hi, Butch. I had a theory. I wanted to know what you thought. John Teeter, the time traveler, had said that in the future mad cow disease would be rampant and cause Alzheimer's and CJD in humans, and maybe perhaps the mutilations are from future or aliens in the future. I don't know. They might be cloned too, but they're getting genetic material from humans and cows from here, from now, right before the disease goes really rampant, and then they're trying to either cure or clone people in the future or something, trying to figure it out. What do you think of that?
Well, there it is, Butch, the time traveler theory.
And I happen to be one of those that believe in that time traveler and interdimensional theory, because some of the sightings that have been photographed and videotaped, and with infrared especially, they come from nowhere and they go to nowhere. I mean, they come out of nowhere and they disappear just as quick as they come. So that she's got a possibility there. I just think that there is a use, whatever the use is, there is a use for the organs they're taking. And they keep taking the same organs. And we've only really started looking at this, ufology as a whole has only started looking at these mutilations since the 50s. So we know they've been here thousands of years, so is it something that they just can't do and they keep trying, or is it something they just keep trying to experiment in, or are they constructing hybrids out of the organs that they're taking?
Judy in Ontario, up in Canada. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi. Didn't they do this type of stuff in concentration camps? And weren't we warned that they would use the alien card? And I'll believe in aliens when they show us everything that's in all those underground bases.
Well, I'm with you on that. And yes, they did do this kind of thing in concentration camps. And yes, they did it again and again and again and again.
To hundreds of thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And
so people ask, why do they keep repeating? Why the need to continually abduct and dissect?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, just like you said about the frogs, okay, so we can use that theory, but I would think if they were going to be studying, they would be take an arm or a leg or a finger or a toe or something like that, but it's the same organs over and over again, and these organs, when you break them down into, they're high in protein, they are in glucose. There's just a lot of use for these types of organs.
High. We're going to leave it at that. High in protein. Think about that. High in protein. From Manila, in the Philippines, other side of the world, I'm Art Bell. It's a rough topic. I know it. human abduction, human mutilation. That's what we're talking about this day, and it is rough stuff. So a warning, if you haven't heeded it by now, you probably won't, but this really is not the stuff for small children, or, for that matter, adults who are affected by this sort of thing. More with Butch Witkowski in a moment. Well, all right, Butch, I need to ask you, have you written a book or chronicled any of what you've investigated, perhaps a website?
We have it on the website. What we try to do is we have a newsletter every month, and we try to put stuff in there regarding what we're doing and what we're investigating and into a newsletter type format, so everybody's welcome to look at it. And if they have any questions, we have a contact us page. They can send us an email, and we'll have somebody get back to them within 24 hours. Our average right now is about 50 to 65 minutes. So we do real well.
Well, your average is going to get spoiled tonight. Can you give us an address or something?
Yep. They can get me direct by my email, which is Butch221 at djazz, DEJAZZD.com, or my assistant director, which is John Bainbridge, and his is CCIJohn2 at Comcast. I believe it's .com, yes. And our website is www.paufsearch.com. And we can have somebody will get back to them right away. Like I said, we usually answer pretty quick. And I'm sorry, that Comcast is .net, not .com.
Yeah, I thought it was .net. Oh, okay, well, judging from the way the phone lines are boiling tonight, you're going to get a lot of response.
I've got over 100 emails so far.
I'm sure you do. So, again, give your website again.
www.paufsearch.com.
Okay. Let's go to Denver, Colorado. And, Jeremy, you're on the air.
Hey, Art. How are you doing?
Fairly well, thank you.
Okay, thank you for taking my call. I was calling to give a little heads up to the guy that called about the buzzing in his back.
Mm-hmm.
And I've detected the same kind of thing. It's in my left rib, and I'm just kind of giving him a point of I don't think he's got to the bad part yet. So the triangle on his back is pretty much like a cupping technique. If anybody knows what that is, it's a therapeutic technique to, like, take fluids out of your back from if they're being put under when this is happening, and they're probably injecting him with something and then taking the fluid back out of his back. But the way I detected it was with a nonlinear junction evaluator, and you can only detect the antenna. And the antenna is in your spine, and you'll get a second harmonic down your spine, and then you'll get a third harmonic in your lower spine.
Wow.
No one probably knows what that is, but you have to talk to a TSCM agent, which is a short for technical surveillance countermeasures. And the machine wasn't invented, the one that can be used, because the original version wasn't strong enough. And they put out a military version, which is not available to purchase.
Would a gauze meter do the same?
I'm not sure. I just kind of went out because I knew that the hospital thing was just a waste of time. So I went out and tried to find something that would detect a non-radiating device.
Uh-huh.
And just by chance, I tracked down this, and the guy that was showing me the civilian model, he had the military model, and then we just scanned my back, and you'll find the device is actually not going to be detectable because it must be shielded by stainless steel, because that's what radio frequencies will just reflect off the stainless steel. But because it's a mechanical device, you have to have the antenna to activate it, right?
Right.
So it's in your spine, and sorry, I'm just kind of.
So that's all right. So that's the vibration that he felt.
Well, they turn it on, but the problem is that it's an infusion pump, and they can inject him with it. And it'll be attached to his spine, and if they do inject him with it, he has to use, if he can't get a cupping, he can just use a vacuum cleaner, and it'll just put the hose right on your back, and it'll just suck it right up the skin. Just because if they inject him, it's going to be like it feels like they poured radioactive waste in your spine.
Okay, that sounds pleasant. Butch, you also suggested a magnet.
Yeah, a magnet or a gauze meter. A magnet will pull it to the surface also. Because the ones that we've seen through Dr. Lear's stuff, they've all been really very, very just under the top layers of skin. I mean, so they're almost at the point where they're visible in some cases, depending on the person's complexion. But a couple, and any X-ray will pick it up. Any X-ray will pick it up. A magnet, placing a magnet over it, and you can move it around. So if it's at your ankle, and you can move it up 2 inches with a magnet, then you have.
That is so weird.
Yeah,
yeah, very weird. Joe in Berkeley, California, you're on the air.
Art, a pleasure to talk to you. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I know I'm going to sound like a nut, so I apologize. But back in 1963 in Bergen County, New Jersey, on a rural road, I was parked with my girlfriend who had a couple of traits, one of which was she was a trance medium, which I was a little lukewarm on myself. But we were smoking a cigarette, and as we looked out through the trees, there was sort of a glow behind the trees, but it was sort of a funny glow in that if you looked directly at it, you really couldn't see it, but if you looked away from it, you could. Anyway, she says to me, they want you to get out of the car, and I'm like, yeah, okay. So anyway, I get out of the car, and I'm looking around in the sky, and as I'm looking, I brush against something about mid-thigh, and at the exact same time that I brushed against something, I heard something go through my head, and it said, compressed gas, 2 valves. And, of course, this means absolutely nothing to me. I looked down, and there wasn't anything there. I thought perhaps there might be a bush that I brushed into, but there was nothing there. I got back in the car, and then we drove for probably maybe 2 or 3 miles, and all of a sudden the hair in the back of my head stood up, and I got very, very frightened, and I pulled over and I stopped because in my pocket in that exact location, I had a gas cigarette lighter, which in fact would be compressed gas, 2 valves. It's not exactly the way I would describe a cigarette lighter. But anyway, I wasn't abducted. I didn't see any loss of time, but I did have something happen there, which I thought was quite unusual.
No, very unusual, very interesting, and that would be the way somebody technically would describe a lighter.
Sure.
Fascinating.
Well, first time I ever heard that one, but that's
the first time I've heard it too.
Yeah, that's something there.
Okay, Kelly, St. Paul, Minnesota, I guess.
Mr. Bill, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. It's great to hear you again.
Thank you.
I just had a question for Mr. Witkowski. Thank you for your work. I'm former military. For the past 13 years, I've worked law enforcement, security. I know you just gave your contact information, and thank you for doing so. But for our brothers in blue, or desert khaki for that matter, that have experienced things that we would like to report, and not just for us, but for your listeners, Art, that may be on the fence about what they believe regarding this phenomenon. But where can they go to read some of these accounts from what they may consider to be a more official source?
Well, being a former Marine and a law enforcement officer, I'll tell you this: if they get their email to me and tell me what they're looking for, I'll put them on the right path, or I'll get the right information to them, and that's a fact.
I wouldn't think there would be a lot of official information about this at all. In fact, I would doubt there's any.
There's a couple things, but they're so outdated, and then you start talking about Majestic 12, which is another.
Yeah, let me put it this way: at least anything that we'd be able to read.
Yeah, anything that I could put in somebody's hands to help them find what they're looking for or find what they're looking for. We have our own database, and I have access to a couple other databases, and I've got scads of information. I even if it comes to just if I have to photocopy something out of a book and email it to them, or I'll do whatever I can do for them.
Okay, Alan in Memphis, Tennessee, you're on the air.
How are y'all doing tonight?
Good.
Just fine, thank you.
What a comment, question, I'm not sure, but when I was younger and even still today, I suffer from sleep paralysis where I'll be in that zone where I'm not quite awake and not asleep, but I can open my eyes and see around me, but I can't move, and it feels like there's something in the room with me. Sometimes I can even see shadows or something out of the corner of my eye. I don't have any memories or anything like that of being abducted or anything like that, but I was just wondering if y'all had any comments or thoughts about that.
Well, my thought would be sleep paralysis is very, very common. Whether or not anything has happened to you during this time, I guess, what do you suggest for that, Butch? Hypnotic regression or what?
Well, one of the easiest things, and especially if it's a male, if you sleep in boxer shorts and you get up in the morning and your boxer shorts are on backwards, there's a pretty good chance that you were abducted.
Or had some unusual.
That comes from Dr. Jacob. He said, he found that in so many cases where, fellas went to bed and they're wearing boxer shorts and they wake up and their boxer shorts are on backwards.
That's a big clue, all right.
Or another one is with sleep paralysis, not so much as paralysis, but does the person have the feeling that they're being held down? Are they trying to fight to get up and it's like somebody's pushing them back down? And that's another good sign they've been abducted.
Reno, Nevada. Betty, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. I'm glad you took my call, and hello, Butch.
How you doing?
Hi. I want to ask you something. When I was about 5 years old, and I'm 65 now, and it was before my mother passed away, and I was at 5 when that happened, and I had an experience that all these years I can remember it as if it just happened yesterday. I'm sure that I must have been taken because I remember running through like a round circle. And you know how on ships, how they have the uplift of the step that you have to step over? And I was a little child, and I was running and I was jumping over these steps, trying to run away from these little people that was chasing me. And to get away from them, I just jumped back because there was like a recess part of it. And I was hiding, and they ran by me. And these were, like I said, they were little in stature. And I was just wondering, since I was so young, and that has been so vivid in my mind all these years, could I have had an experience then? Because there was other things afterwards that I have experienced where I got these huge lumps on the back of my neck there at the base of the skull. And I've asked doctors about it, and they say, it's just a muscle and stuff like that from tension and all. But sometimes they get, and they hurt me so bad, so bad. And, it just, and now I'm having to go to a doctor for my kidneys because the doctor is saying that my kidneys are putting out too much protein. And before the break, I think I heard you say something about the protein. And I was just wondering, what do you think, Butch? Do you think I ought to? Because it was not like an imagination. I mean, you know.
Well, I think that Butch and a doctor are likely to give you very different advice on the subject. Let me put it that way. Butch, I would imagine that a lot of this sort of thing is exactly what it sounds like, some sort of physical ailment, not due to aliens, not due to abduction or mutilation or any sort of manipulation,
right,
but just physical problems. And how does one, in your position, separate the two?
Well, there are a few things, like the boxer shorts. I mean, when I first heard that, I just went, oh, my God, where are we going with this? But when I thought about it, and also people, let's say, they never had sleep paralysis or they never had any problem sleeping, but every now and then they have to, it's like they have to fight to get out of bed. There's like something holding them down. They actually flail where they hurt themselves, or after that's over, they find a mark on their body that wasn't there when they went to bed. And that's a good indication that person has been abducted, or the abduction proceeded but didn't get as far as it was supposed to. And then you have the person that has sleep paralysis, and they tell you they need the thing to breathe at night because, they stop breathing. And then there's a physical ailment. But it just seems like everything that happens at night is an abduction. And people have been abducted in broad daylight. I mean, there's a case of a guy in, I believe it wasn't Kentucky. I think it was Tennessee, where he was talking to his wife in another room, and she stopped talking, and he kept talking, and he finally walked in, and she was gone. And an hour later, she showed up out at their barn, just standing there, and he said, "Where were you?" And she said, "Well, I was out here." And he said, "No, you weren't. You were in there." And she went under regression, and she's been abducted since she was the age of 5, and she was now 45.
Wow. Terry in Topeka, Kansas, you're on the air. Not a lot of time. Hello.
Hi, Art and Butch. This is Terry in Topeka, and I just wanted to share an abduction experience with you that I had.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, anyway, the first time that I ever woke up and not in my bed is when this happened. Anyway, after I woke up, they put me back out again. And anyway, I found myself being floated down this hallway that was brightly lit, and it was white. There were no doors, nothing to distinguish a hallway or doors or anything. And I couldn't tell where the light came from. But anyway, when I tried to turn around and see these two little guys that were floating me down the hallway, couldn't see them, and they waved their hand over this part of the wall, and it opens up, and they take me into this room, and it's an auditorium. And they set me in this balcony by myself, and down below me are just hundreds of people in this audience, and it just looks like a normal audience. But I could sense that they weren't really human, even though they kind of looked human. Anyway, so I'm sitting there, and these two guys wouldn't let me turn around, and they told me telepathically to try not to leave again because they would be standing right outside the door, and they would catch me if I did. Anyway, so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, this woman walks out on the stage, and everybody in the audience kind of quieted down. And it was a round room. And anyway, she started singing this scale, and she was just horrible. And anyway, the audience started laughing at her, and it reminded me of, just a story out of, some 50s greasers type, West Side Story type thing, and anyway, everybody in the audience started laughing at her. And then they started throwing, cheesy.
I'm so sorry to do this, but she got cut off anyway. I'm so sorry to do this, but we're literally out of time. Butch, it has been an honor to have you on the program. It's a very, very difficult subject, and I'm honored to have had the opportunity to talk about it with you.
No, the honor's all mine. It's a pleasure to be there. And
okay. We will do this again, Butch. I guarantee we'll do it again. It's a whale of a subject.
Yes, it is.
Take care, and good night, my friend.
Good night. You take care.
All right, folks, from the other side of the world, that's it for this day. I'm Art Bell, in for George Noory, who will be back next week, tomorrow night. Ian Punnett from Manila, Philippines. Night all.